My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm a journalist and a film festival consultant, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you to this very important discussion. It's wonderful to see it's already standing room only, and I'm sure we're 30 seconds early. There'll be more people coming in. Thank you so much for being here. I know we have a very engaged, passionate, top-level audience here, so we'll try to make sure you've got time for some questions throughout the talks. So, this is an EFM Horizon event, as you know. It's co-hosted with the Swedish Film Institute, so thanks for all those teams for having us here today, particularly Themba from the EFM, thank you, and Petra, working with the Swedish Film Institute. I think you all know why we're here. 50-50 for 2020. Well, it's 2020, so what are we doing now? We're going to talk about this roadmap for the future. We want to, I think, be forward-facing mostly today, looking at where do we go from here, looking at some of the strides that have been made, how do we prevent those from slipping, what are the new ideas that we move forward with, and we've really got some of the world's top experts on gender equality in film here with us today, so I'm really grateful to be here for this discussion. Just to let you know, we're sort of operating in three parts today. Anna Serner from the Swedish Film Institute is going to kick us off with a very short keynote, and then I will welcome Anna and Dame Heather Rabbats from Time's Up UK to do a sort of two-person chat. And then finally, we'll end with a fireside chat with Delphyne Besse from Collectif 50-50 in France. And we'll make sure there's time for audience questions after the two-person chat, and hopefully one or two for Delphine as well. So, that's a lot of parts. Let's go ahead and get this party started. I would like to welcome Anna Serner, CEO of the Swedish Film Institute and one of the rock stars of gender equality. I say it, but it's true.
Thank you, Wendy, and I'm so happy to see all of you here. We launched the 50-50 by 2020 in 2016. And we all know that we are not 50-50 or equal in any matter, but I think that we all should remember what has actually happened. So I want to take you on the roadmap from the history for just a few minutes. So these are some pictures of what we have been doing since 2013. Because in 2013, in Cannes, the Swedish Film Institute were launching a big party because we were celebrating 50 years old. And at this party, we as well decided to launch our action plan for gender equality. So we sent out an invitation to reporters from all over the world, that they are all in Cannes, which you all know. And we had rented a piece of a big beach where we were going to have the party. So we actually had some reporters showing up, about 10, I think. They kind of saw me standing, you know, it's always windy and rainy in Cannes as well. So I was in my very cute dress, trying to get my word coming through. The reporters that entered passed me by to go to the bar, because we had already started to serve drinks. And that was the state of the union in 2013. And we launched our action plan saying that if Sweden didn't reach 50-50 at the end of 2016, we actually said 15, but we had to postpone it of legal reasons, we were not afraid of doing quotas. And then we made some actions, and we started to work. And 2014, we made some seminars, and was the same 20 women sitting in the front listening. In 2015, Kate Blanchett got an Oscar for a film, I don't remember what it was. And she went, sorry? Blue Jasmine, we say that. Not important. The important thing was she entered the stage and she started to talk about what is it being like being a woman in Hollywood. How much less do you earn, and what kind of working conditions do you have, and what kind of roles do you get to play? And she really started off a conversation that Emma Watson, Meryl Streep, Patricia Arquette, whoever red carpet women followed. And at that fall, or actually the same year in Cannes, was the famous year when I was walking in the streets and this woman comes up to me and say, "Can I have a selfie?" And I was like, "Do you want a selfie? With who or why?" I said, "With you." I said, "Why do you want it with me?" "Because you're Anna Serner." I said, "Yes, that is true, but how do you know?" "Gender equality." And that was the start of, actually, of an awareness that has just been growing and growing and growing. And the Harvey Weinstein problem, which wasn't only Harvey Weinstein, we all know, but that started off a conversation as well that has really made everyone aware and understanding that there is nothing like before. Questioning these big awards and questioning who gets the money is something that everyone now is really working on. And it's not about gender only. We all know it's about skin color, it's about LGBTQ issues, but I would say probably most what kind of color of the skin do you have and what kind of gender do you have? And we have just started the journey. But today I left the European Film, well, EFADS, which is the Film Institute in Europe. We have a gender working group. And it's interesting when you go around a table and ask people what has happened in your country since last time. And we talk about countries that are, some years ago, were doing nothing, like Ireland, Catholic country, the Balkan countries, the southern European countries like Spain, countries that now are doing so many things that I had to rush off and leave the meeting because they are actually taking this thing seriously. And in 2016, when we had achieved 50-50 2 years ago, I realized and we realized that, yes, right now we are doing 50-50 for white women. Are we happy? No. So we had to do another action plan. And we launched the next action plan in Cannes the same year. And being experienced of what kind of interest we had, this time we rented a bit smaller piece of the beach. We had our Minister of Culture, and she really loved the limelight. So I was very nervous that she would feel left alone. So we actually made the chairs look full, even though there were no people there. And we put the bar on the other side of the chairs, so the reporters had to pass by. But this year, we had places for 60 people, and it turned out up 180. Not all reporters, but a lot of people interested. I don't know how many we are here today, but look around you. It's not only women. I welcome all men, because I know that you are as sincere as we are. We are not all white. We have other colors. And we are from so many different parts of the globe right now. So in 2016, we launched the 50-50 by 2020 because it was such a good USP. And NASA already had taken it. And they also have failure is not an option. So I think that is where we now will take off from. Failure is not an option. We are not in parity or equal in any way, but we have made a big improvement. And I think with all these people around us, we can now really be able to make change. So I'm so happy that we are now in 2020 and we can summarize and we can just head off, because we will achieve a world where everyone's stories will be considered as a story from an individual and not from something else. And let's just remind ourselves and keep on asking the hard questions to the decision makers. And I'm so happy that you took your time and that Wendy will now take us from here. Thank you for coming.
Wonderful way, impassioned as always, to kick us off. Anna, thank you. And I'd like to welcome up Dame Heather Rabbats, of the chair of Time's Up UK, which has been so active.
Then I want to sit beside you.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe I'll move over.
Yeah.
I don't want to be lonely over there. Heather, I'd like to start with you. And what's been the latest activity at Time's Up UK? Maybe you can update us a bit. Obviously, you were in the news around the BAFTAs a bit, but I know there's a lot of work you're doing. So can you tell us what's up?
Yeah. So I chair Time's Up UK. I also sit on the global board. And it's hugely important that we align our strategies globally because, as self-evident truth, this is a global industry. So whilst we have huge numbers of all the biggest films being made in the UK, be it Star Wars or Jurassic World, the decisions are all made in LA. So I suppose in terms of the initiatives, what we're trying to do is to reshape the ecology of making films. And to do that, we're trying to intervene at multiple series of levels. So just a few examples. We've obviously launched a campaign to ensure that more women are slated on films. We know if you have more women directors, they will have more diverse crews, and that is a major step forward. We've obviously worked on the harassment and anti-bullying guidelines, which every studio has now adopted, every production company is following. And we've also been particularly involved in ensuring that on productions, particularly for young actors, they get intimacy training, and there's been new guidance done by the directors around filming scenes, nude scenes. So what we're trying to do, they sound small, don't they? But actually what they're doing is it's all about shifting the culture. I think, of course, I have to pause for a moment on Harvey Weinstein, whose decision likely to be tomorrow in New York. Remember, he's still subject to charges in LA. He's still subject to a criminal investigation in the UK and to another court action. So whatever happens tomorrow, it is not the end of this issue. In fact, it isn't about win or lose. This is a movement that started. It's not going to go back in the box. And I suppose I would just briefly touch upon BAFTA. So BAFTA was very disappointing. Unlike the Berlin Festival this year, which I think has made incredible progress in terms of transparency on governance. And that actually the argument that says there weren't any films to choose from is just totally false. Probably there were more films from people of colour and women than we've seen in BAFTA for a long time. And therefore there were significant choices. And really what that lands on is who is making those decisions of what good looks like. And if you only have good being defined by white men, then you're going to miss a huge amount of amazing performances, amazing films like Mati Diop, Atlantic, films that didn't even get a look in. So we will be working very hard to really look at the governance review of BAFTA, just as the Oscars need to be attending to themselves. And we look forward to seeing what Cannes and Venice will do.
Great. We all know that the awards is the end piece of that puzzle. So, does it, you're saying, I mean, there are lots of voices that we could shout about this year. Queen and Slim, lots of wonderful films. Is the pipeline robust enough, or we still need to do work on that pipeline of what's getting made at what budget?
We absolutely still have to work on the pipeline. So that's why you have to influence the entire ecology of filmmaking. So in the UK, we've worked on having no longer all-male white writers' rooms, for example, so beginning to develop more women writers, people of colour. So you have to work at every level to ensure that the pipeline gets strengthened, and then particularly who finances film and who green lights them. And again, we need to see more diversity of those executives. So it is getting better. You know, the journey is, you know, as you just said, you know, who would have thought we would have been here? Who would have thought? You know, I can remember arguing about diversity years ago. Nobody paid it any attention. BAFTA could not get out from under the issue of diversity, even on the night of awards, even when it meant that, you know, His Royal Highness had to attend to it. So these are all signals that this is not going away.
But it's really going around the table that I just left with all the film institutes in Europe. And I mean, film institutes in Europe is really crucial for what films gets made. And they were all complaining about the low numbers of applications with female directors, screenwriters, and DOPs. Okay. And I think that is something we really have to address. What kind of applications we get, who feels welcome. Yes. And I think that is really a big issue, that we have had a gang of people that felt welcome, felt comfortable, knew that we existed, and we just need to reach out of that circle. Because I think it's really obvious that which we have done, counted, what kind of perspective was it if a woman or a man wrote a story. And it's very obvious that, I mean, you're allowed to write any story and tell any story, no matter what gender or skin color you have. But people tend to write stories about themselves. So women write stories about 50% women perspectives, and men 50% of men, and then it's mixed. But it's really, we need the diversity of all kinds behind the camera, because then on the screen you will see something new. Yes. And I think that is really what we need to get some things going. And we know exactly what you say, that when we have women directors, they pick women DOPs. So in Sweden, in our little Oscar award, Guldbaggen, the golden bugs, the golden bug, the last couple of years actually, we nominate 3 DOPs every year, and there have been 2 or some years 3 women being nominated.
So they're out there working.
So they are out there, and the last 2 years they won. So, and I think that has shown for other women wanting to become a DOP that you have an opportunity to get to work.
I mean, one thing I really thought was important is about a year and a half ago, maybe now, Swedish Film Institute, you looked not only at the number of women being backed, but the budgets.
Yeah.
And I think this is so important, because is Netflix giving any woman as much money as they gave to Scorsese for The Irishman? Maybe not.
Maybe, but we don't know about their number.
Okay, yeah, if they were telling us. But how do we reach parity there? And Heather, I'd love for you to jump in too, that we enable women, they feel welcome to pitch a big budget sci-fi or a bigger budget film. How can we encourage
this
that?
This is the report that we made. It's on our website, and we have a few in the back where we really try to follow the money, because the money is the power. What I did in Cannes, which was very upsetting, was that I threatened with only women getting the bigger budget for 1 year. And that was obviously something really provoking.
People freaked out, yes.
People freaked out, the politicians freaked out, the media freaked out. And the industry did not freak out that much, because they just ignored it, I think. But we then launched an incentive for women scriptwriters for only bigger budgets. And we are in the middle of that to try to get some films that is really so far in development that if we're a producer and if it's good, you should not be able to resist it. And we will see. We need to do those kinds of incentives here and make reports and keep it up, awareness.
Yeah. And that's partly why we launched the 4% challenge with Tessa Thompson, which was to really push the studios to slate women directors. So in the UK, Working Title, which is obviously one of our most significant studios, have got their next 6 films are slated for women across a range of budgets, and within the studios now looking to have women slated for some of the bigger films. You're absolutely right. We need to work even more on the pipeline. I think what's interesting, though, that if in a year's time there's an absence of women directors, from the talent perspective, and obviously Time's Up, we work particularly with the talent, they're raising their voice. These are the people who drive the sales of the movies. And if they are saying this is not acceptable, and increasingly that's what they're saying, then that the studio bosses, whether that's parity of pay for women and male actors, has definitely changed the dial since women and actors have said, no more, we want the same amount of money that's paid to our male colleagues.
And you've both kind of mentioned it, but, you know, Anna, as you said, we're moving forward from here, and Heather, you said, you know, this can't be put back in the box. But on my darkest nights, I am scared that maybe some executives see this, oh, this is a good trend now, we'll get the female audience, and how do we make sure this isn't a trend and it never goes back in the box?
By never resigning and never die.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we just have to keep on working and you know, make strategies. Like our next report like this will be hopefully launched in Cannes, and the title right now is What Woman? So we're doing in-depth interviews with women of color, actresses and directors, of how they have it in their work, because I think that we have so many discriminations that is built into the structure that we need to address, and letting them have their own voices. So there are 2 researchers, women of color as well, at the university in Sweden, that have done the interviews, and they are doing the analysis of the interviews. So there will be real quotas from the people that we need to include, that we have been we haven't done that yet. Yes, we have, but not enough.
And Heather, from what you said.
Well, I think no, I think that all of that work is hugely important. My sense is this is not a conversation that's going to stop, just as evidenced by recent events. I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle. I also think, as so many women, whether they're women who've come forward, the silence breakers, or whether they're women talent who are standing up for pay or for more women directors like Tessa Thompson, they are all, and we are all, discovering our voice. And the more that we raise the voice, I think the less easy it's going to be for it to be ignored.
Or swept under the carpet.
Swept under the carpet. And as I said, it was very interesting to me what happened at the BAFTAs. That actually, I thought initially it was just going to be like an overnight wonder, and it just stayed and stayed and stayed. Now, we all worked hard at ensuring, of course, it stayed in the headlights. And I think that's the other thing. We're much more sophisticated and have access to, I think, media strategies that means that we can start to get our viewpoint across when it didn't used to previously.
But I think as well, I mean, for me, it's obvious with all kind of discrimination and inequalities that it will take us generations. So quick fixes won't happen. And we just need to understand that. And it will go, sometimes it will be 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. Yeah. I think in Sweden we are in the 1 step backward right now, where the opinion is that our work at the Swedish Film Institute is minimizing the freedom of art. Yeah. Because of doing things for equality narrows down what the white men are able to talk about, more or less. That is, and that is, yeah, you can laugh, but I tell you, it's really hard to challenge that argument that people that are depending on our money tell us that you are making us try to please you. And that means that we leave our artistic voices. And of course we don't want them to leave their artistic voices, but my message is, so stick to your artistic voice and don't try to please us, because pleasing is never artistically quality.
That's not what you want anyway.
No, but it's really, I mean, it's all over right now.
Yeah, no, and it was one of the arguments raised at BAFTA. It's been one of the arguments raised in other award ceremonies that this is about what is good, what serves the art. But who is defining good?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That is the big question. Who defines good? If it is only one lens, you're only going to get one viewpoint. Do I think Quentin Tarantino is a great filmmaker? Yeah, I do, of course. But should he have had alongside him other filmmakers who've done some astonishing films and other performances which were just incredible? Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not saying that white men don't have a role, but you just cannot dominate the landscape, guys, you know? Not anymore. Yeah. Not anymore. I mean, people ask me, should we have a Women Directors Award or should we have a People of Colour Award? I go, well, should we have a White Men Directors Award? Yeah. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine it?
Those exist
can you
already.
imagine it? You just can't imagine it, can you? Because it's who is defining the other. We are not the other. We're here. Yeah. And so, and also, we are in the business of storytelling. We are in the business of telling stories that show an insight into the world, into difference, into identity, into salvation, into redemption. We all have something to say. And in that sense, that is what is so fundamentally important. And that is what serves the art.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And we have audience as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, the art house industry that is really driven by the festivals, which is really true. They have, it's the same bubble going to each and every festival, and they are all agreeing on what is the quality and what is not quality. And you just need to change people on power. Yeah. So you can realize that others do find quality in other kinds of stories and other expressions. And I think it's really, we really have to consider as a funder how we are looking at stories. Who are we to say that this is urgent or relevant? For who are we talking?
The audience is
the audience is very many except us.
Yeah. I would like to talk a little bit more about film festivals. Here in Berlin, if I've got my stats right, I think about 38% of films total directed by women. Not bad. A third of the competition. The jury and advisors and selection committee, 66% female. The directors of the festival, about 43%. Again, not terrible. But there was a more distressing report that came out from the USC Annenberg Institute, Stacey L. Smith, who we all know, inclusion at film festivals. At the top 5 festivals from 2017 to 2019, 75% male in the main competitions. This is directors. 65% white. Women of color were just 8% of, and again, there is some argument that the pipeline is not getting those voices to the level of the competition, so that's an issue too. But I think executives running these film festivals are 70% male and 90% white. Programmers, 53% male and 80% white. So if you see that it's 90% white, maybe that's reflective in the women of color being 8% of directors in competitions. What role do you think film festivals have? On the flip side, in Sweden, Gothenburg Film Festival, they said they were going to actually hit 50-50 in terms of their programming this year, and they did it. And I talked to the artistic director, who's a man, Jonas, a very feminist man, and he said it wasn't hard at all to find the films. No. That they did it. So what do we need the festival world to do more of, be better at? And because it really does play a big role in what films are acclaimed, doesn't it?
I think they should start educate themselves, because we are all unconscious bias. So it doesn't help if you're 50-50 men, women, white, black, if you're not aware of what kind of stereotyped or structures you are contributing to. And women have been contributing to men's power for decades and centuries. And it doesn't help if you put a woman who believes she's a man or as good as a man and believe that she will make a difference, because she will spot what will they think is quality, and then she will propose those ones. So you need to educate, and I mean, we are doing it in the Swedish Film Institute all the time, and I need to re-educate myself all the time because I'm stuck with the structures. So start off with education and rotate people, not staying on their positions too long. And that goes for me too.
Yeah, because not everybody wants to be educated, I think.
No.
No, listen, I think education is hugely important. I think making sure that people don't serve for the life. You know, it's interesting that all of the directors on the Caesars have all just resigned. They seem to have been there since, you know, the Ark or whatever. So I think, you know, first of all, that's why I think governance is really important. And then the other thing is where you know, and Berlin's shown this, appoint people, appoint women, appoint people of colour, see what happens. See what happens. You know, we don't have to wait till... I think data is really important, but sometimes people say, well, we need more data. We know. Well, actually, we know.
We know it's
We
not
know you
great.
just walk into a room, you walk in to watch those awards at the BAFTAs, you think, guess what? Guess what? Another all-white male shortlist. My God, I am shocked. You know, so... I just think, you know, if you just, anybody who has power, who is in control of decision-making, whether you're an awards festival, an institute, a studio, a production company, a Netflix, appoint women, appoint people of colour, and see what happens. Now, we all might still need to be educated. I'm getting very old, you know. I'm sure I still need educating. Absolutely I do. But it will change if you have more people of diversity sitting at all the levels of decision-making. Yeah. And that's what we have to focus on. We have to focus on power. You know, the thing about power is nobody gives it up willingly. Okay? Because actually power's got really sexy to have. Makes you feel good. You think, I can go and do this, right? So nobody in history, I was a history student a long time ago, nobody gives up power willingly. You have to wrench it. You have to wrench it out of people's bleeding hands. And you do that by data, by building alliances, by having people speak up and stand up, whoever you are in the film ecology. And the more we do that, the harder it will be to resist.
Good, thank you. I wanted to pick up on one thing that I was going to ask about later, which is alliances. Yeah. Because we've got Time's Up, we've got the Me Too movement, we've got Swedish Film Institute over here, we've got WIFT, we've got WIFT in every country. Yeah. Is there enough joined up thinking? Do we need one umbrella? Or how do we make sure that the most passionate people who want to make change are connecting and having a stronger voice? You are.
I think so.
Yeah, I think we are.
It's happening.
Yeah.
I think because we're women, you know, guess what? We talk to each other. It's like, I mean, look, you can obviously go into greater structuralism, but I think we're getting better and better at making sure we're sharing data and sharing intelligence. I think to wrest change, you need to be like a multi-pronged monster. You know, you never know where we're going to turn up. We can keep them guessing. Was she part of that? Was she part of that? Or are they part of that? So I think, but what is important, I do believe what is important is that we do absolutely stay in touch. How we do that, and guess what? We live in this wonderful technology age. We don't have to all be in the same place, in the same country at the same time. But how we share that intelligence and best practice and where people are making a difference, I think is really fundamental. Because we don't have enough time. We really do not have enough time to reinvent the wheel. So, you know, whatever's happening in Sweden or wherever's happening in any other country, we will all learn from each other. We don't have an ego at stake here. It doesn't have to be my idea. You know, it can be all of our ideas, as long as it works.
And I think as well, I mean, we are really quite a few here knows each other, and we met before, and we love each other, and we help each other, and we try not to make seminars that collide with each other, and we try not to steal each other's thunder. And I think that what is really the most beautiful now is that there are a lot of men here. I really think, I mean, it's a common problem. It's not a woman's problem. And we have now actually passed the point where women spent time meeting other women, wanting something that no one they met could give, which meant that everyone was sitting and whining. So the whining part is really being exchanged into constructive, doing things, having power, and doing it together wherever we are in the world and whatever gender we have. And I think that's the only way to do it. I mean, we are so many that even though it can be hard and we all need to educate, there are a lot of people that really, really want a better world.
Yes. No, there's some great energy, and as you said, I think the whining era is long past.
Yeah.
And we're at action and shouting.
Yeah.
Shouting in a good way. What about intersectionality? Is that more and more important as we look ahead past 2020?
For us in Sweden, I mean, we are living in a global world where in Sweden we've received, I think we gained 10–15% more inhabitants in the past decade, which means that there are people from so many other places in the world that now is part of the Swedish society. We were a very white and closed country 10–15 years ago, and it has changed dramatically. And of course that means that we are challenged with how we always been doing in Sweden, but I think that the intersectionality is the only way of addressing it. But we have a long way to go because we are really babies.
Yes. I think was it SAS who got in trouble? So nothing Swedish. Oh, some people didn't like that.
No.
Yes. And either for you?
I think it's hugely important that we have multiple identities. I'm a mixed race woman, so issues about my identity, my race, my gender, my country, these are all part of what is in my DNA and in all of our DNAs, and therefore intersectionality isn't I find the word sometimes quite difficult.
It shouldn't be separate
because it somehow doesn't talk to us as human beings. We all have complexities and as layers around our identity. And, there's nothing like films that can explore that. So that issue of ensuring that when we talk about equity, we understand what equity means. So equity is about gender, it is about race, it is about sexuality and disability.
Class.
And those issues have all got to feature in the discourse that we're trying to push forward on.
I'm going to open it up to questions after this one. Do we need, 50-50 for 2020? Do we need a revised year? Do we need a different target? Do we need quotas? Do you think we need a new slogan?
It's going to be hard to be 50-50 in 2021, isn't it? I suppose it could be. We'll be 50-50 in 2030.
Doesn't rhyme.
Doesn't rhyme. 50-50.
No, but I think that for me it's always been very important to have a trajectory. Have a target, so you have energy and emotion, you want to achieve something. So we just need to figure out, and we have this year to do that. So that's why we call it 50-50 for the future, or 50-50 forever. And there are a lot of 50-50s, and I think that they are nice, but they are not clear enough. I think we still need a clear target.
Planned.
Yeah, so I think that, that we will, by the end of this year, we will launch a new thing.
Swedish Film Institute will have a new target or goal.
Yeah, right now I promise you that, and my colleagues here are now hating me, but yes.
You can tell it to me. You can whisper it in my ear.
I don't have it yet. It's only February.
What about for Time's Up? New targets, new...
See, the great thing about Time's Up is we're not confined to a year.
Yes. Time is always up.
Time's always up. Time's up on sexual harassment and bullying, etc. Absolutely. I think what we try and do is have various targets to try and make sure you're charting a journey. It's all about momentum. How do we sustain momentum? So whether that's the number of women directors slated for films, whether that's how we've increased diversity in terms of film crews or writing rooms, or the numbers of studios who've adopted the harassment guidelines. So we're always scheduling targets in our journey, but we do know it is a journey, it is a movement. To change culture will take us a long time. But the thing that the targets helps establish is that it helps us navigate that road, and that we can say, okay, that's where we were, as you were saying earlier, this is where we are today, and in next year we're going to be somewhere different.
Yeah, great. I know there's some passionate voices in the room. Does anybody have a question? That gentleman there, speaking up.
I look forward to the day that a woman puts her hand up first.
I will be not political correct. Sorry, I'm not political correct, never. 50-50 is wrong because at your age, for example, on 100 males, there is on 100 females, it's 100 males, there is 104 females. It's just natural progression. This is the way. So 50-50 should be 49
and 51.
Yes. And second of all, I coming from a country where the gender and race equality was mandated by law till 89. I'm coming from East Europe. And we see that this not all the time give the good results, because what happened, one of the, let's say, secondary things that happened, it is that there was quotas. It means that must be 50-50, law by law. And what's happened right now, we have a lot of female engineers that was put engineers because they must be engineers, because there is a quota that need to be respected. And then these quotas, right now there are many female engineers that... the question is, female engineers right now that don't like engineering, don't want to work that, but they must be engineers because by law. And the politically incorrect question is, when is it in the project is included female sailors and male that can give birth?
What?
To have full equality, we need to have female sailors and males that can give birth. So
can men give birth? Would that help things?
Yes,
no.
That would help.
Yeah.
So we will work on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we have a woman with a question. Hello.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name's Chantel. Come with the BFI delegation today.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I had a question. I know a lot of our focus is on directors and writers, and I don't see a lot of focus on producers.
Yeah.
Considering we have to go out and find this money to make these films. So I was wondering if there's anything that you guys are thinking about doing in the future that could actually help us producers to go to, obviously we're going to a lot of males for money, and how do we foster that? Because ideally, a director or a writer can't make anything without the producer.
Yeah.
But yet we don't really have any producer initiatives or funds that producers can go with their projects, more or less, and try and get somebody's money, apart from the ones that then kind of second grade you depending on your director or your writer. So is there any ideas you have moving forward about how producers can be helped in order for us to get these projects that you're searching for to the forefront?
Good question.
In regards of Sweden and quite a few other countries, we actually have had 60-40 women than men for quite a few years. So there hasn't been, as well with the bigger budgets. So that hasn't been really an issue. What we have found is the issue is that the companies are owned by men, so it's still somebody else that buys the story. So what we are looking for now is to get women to own their stories and their IP rights to be able to build companies. And I think that is... in terms of the funding, we do count producers as well, as much as scriptwriters and directors, but it's always more women than men.
There are some funds in the UK that are now targeted at women and people of colour to get some early stage funding, which is encouraging. We need to see absolutely more of that. But also what we need is for, and it's just starting to happen, is some of the bigger studios and indeed broadcast platforms taking risks on first-time only producers and writers and directors. And we have to, you know, risk looks differently if it's from us, isn't it? It doesn't somehow look the same. So that's partly about education. It's also about, I think, how we ensure that we're supporting particularly young and emerging producers who just don't know how the system is working, just so that we can link them in. So at Times Up UK, in our meetings, we try and always make sure that we're supporting access into the system. And that's what we need to change. We need to break down those barriers in the system.
There's an interesting, you've probably seen it already, but there's a UK independent producers roundtable that put out a sort of study, a report a week or two ago, and things in there were like, you know, the producer must demand 8% of the production budget so they can pay their rent. Or that, you know, it's notable at film festivals a lot of times, especially with a first-time feature perhaps, the director will get invited, the cast, the producer who might have done it all for 10 years doesn't get the invite to the festival. So things like that, I think, also need to change. Question here.
I'm from South Africa, and what was interesting about Parasite was that a story that came from another place, another culture, another cultural experience was highlighted. And what I want to know with Time's Up and 50-50, or is it 25, 25, 25, 25, for all of us to be, how do we become an inclusive space in the sense that our stories in the global south are really important stories. They are stories that they come from a different energy, and they give us a different sense of what's possible in the world. How do we have an opportunity to tell our stories when you come to festivals? It's a little better now, but it used to be that nobody was interested in seeing you. And, you know, when somebody sees you, they really are able to observe you, because the choosers were not able to see that story is a human experience. Story comes from all of us, and all of our stories have validity as they travel the world. So when Parasite was a story that came from somewhere else and suddenly was given recognition, it meant that suddenly my story had a validity. Yeah. So I want to have an understanding how it's great that we're talking about gender, it's great that we're talking about race, but we need to talk about how there's a regional bias and how our stories and who we are from other places aren't being seen as well. So that's, I think, is a really critical part of the inclusion framework, is to include all other regions. Stories.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
I mean, I totally agree, and I think, you know, when we talk about inclusion and race and diversity, it cannot just be from one world. So, you know, from this, you know, it has to be from all of our continents. So we share those experiences that you've been talking about. It's interesting. Have you heard what Trump said about Parasite?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, let's make more racist films. That's the solution. I mean, but that's what we're up against.
But I think
and that's what has to be challenged. And it's great that Parasite got so much attention, because it shifts the world axis of attention.
But I think that the hard questions is very useful, and I think that everyone here has the possibility, but also the obligation to ask everyone in a decision-making position, what do you do in your festival? How many films from Africa do you have in your festival? And I think really that we see a change, maybe by appointing other people that for instance, Sweden this year realized that Berlinale is actually taking a lot of other countries into consideration.
Yeah.
So we had a much harder time getting our films into Berlin.
Yeah.
So talking about giving away your power,
Yeah.
we should just now relax. The best one will always enter, but we should ask everyone, so what kind of the parts of the world are you now having as well? Not focus 1 year, but every year.
Yeah, yeah, exactly so.
I see so many hands, and I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to move to the next section because Delphine is here. Maybe if we have time at the end, we'll bring you back on for another question or two, if we have time.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies. That was amazing. Welcome, Delphine Besse. Thank you. Yes, please. And I think the microphone is over there, though. But just grab the microphone. Delphine is co-founder and co-president of Collectif 50/50. Welcome.
Thanks.
Tell us, Collectif 50/50 was the organization sort of spearheading some of this 50/50 for 2020 with the festivals. And I think some people still thought maybe this meant 50/50 directors. And that's not what the pledge is. So maybe you can tell us about what the pledge actually was and who is doing it properly.
Wow.
Big question.
Yeah, big question, like you say. So, well, the Collectif 50/50 was launched in 2018, and indeed, the festival pledge is the first big, achievement we brought. The idea was really because, of course, we are French. We are based in France, and we were created in March 2018. So the first big moment for us was Cannes, and it's the biggest festival in the world and the most important one in our country. So we knew we had to do something. And one problem we had with Cannes, and we've had for years, is the lack of, women in competition. But more than that, is really the lack of transparency when it came to the selection process and who was on the committees. So the idea was really to ask for more transparency and accountability from the big festivals in terms of who is actually calling the shots. Yeah. So the first commitment of the pledge is to commit to gender parity in the selection committees and to achieve gender parity in the board of directors, depending on how the organization is structured, in the direction setup. And this is, of course, something we are coming very, for instance, the board of Cannes is, I think, 25% female, so it is a calendar they have to, to change progressively. It cannot happen in 1 year. And more importantly as well, we always structured our action around data, because data is essential. When we started, because even before Collectif 50/50, I was driving an organization called Le Deuxième Regard, which is sort of the ancestor of Collectif 50/50, which we launched in 2013. So the subject was a little less hot at the time. And people keep telling us, oh, yeah, but the situation is changing. It's a generational thing. There are more women. There are more women, there are more producers, more directors. Look in France, we have Céline Sciamma, Rebecca Zlotowski, so many women. And you were like, yeah, and now let's see the numbers and see how many women we actually have. And that's actually the first thing we did was ask the CNC to mandate a study about, gender equality in the industry. And the results, of course, were that, oops, no, there aren't so many women in the end. Because basically we're 50/50 in the world, but not in the film industry. So because data is essential, what we also require from festivals, because one argument we always got from festival programmers was, yes, I would love to select more women, but just women don't submit.
They're not submitting.
Exactly, they're not submitting. There are no women directors, not enough, blah, blah. So we really wanted to know, from the source, how many films submitted by women they actually receive every year, and how many actually end up being selected. So we have at least a data, some, figures that we know is the starting point, and the idea is, of course, to see some improvement across the years. And that's how we started.
But I saw Berlin had a wonderful report of
totally. Berlin is the one
really
doing the best job, because they have a report which is also complete. Because for us, what's important is, of course, like we said, the directors, because this is, let's say the general manager of the film or whatever. So this is really the key position for us, and that's what we're fighting for: is more female directors, more females at the helm. But there are many other positions that are terribly underrepresented, and one of them, for instance, being a director of photography. Yeah. I mean, it's about like 18-20% women represented in this field. So the fact that Berlin is actually getting figures on every position is really important, I think. And this is something we're trying to get from other festivals, but of course it's a lot of work. So not everyone has either the energy or the means or the will to put that work.
I'm proud. I work for San Sebastian, and they compiled it for the first year. Venice signed this pact, correct? Have they given you some data I haven't seen?
They have given data, but the problem is, because again, numbers is, like we said, I mean, we like numbers because they are raw and, they are stark and you cannot deny them, but sometimes you can also manipulate them in some ways. So we have a very different definition with Venice as to who is actually calling the shots. So for them, it's not the same. I mean, for me, clearly there is no parity. For them, there is parity, but they are not, using the same let's say, way of reading things. And when it comes to selection, I mean, there still is a great bias, and they only managed to have 2 women last year, was it? And then 1 the year before in competition, which is completely, outrageous, and clearly they're not making any effort. But yes, they did sign the pledge.
But Alberto did say that the women directed some VR, and maybe one day they'll be ready to make some good feature films.
Exactly.
I paraphrase, but it was,
I lived in Italy for some time, and I know the culture and even know the language, so I know it's coming from a very far, it's a tough country to crack.
Yes.
It's really, it's in the culture.
We've seen some bright spots I was mentioning before. Gothenburg did 50-50 in their program. I mean, do you think that is realistic, 50-50 in terms of director split in a program, or are people trying for that target? They were the first to say they're going to do this, and they did it. Do you think we need to see?
Well, I think that the idea behind Gothenburg doing this was to prove that it was feasible, because lots of people say, well, we cannot find half of our competition among women directors, which is not true, because even Berlin last year, competition was quite gender balanced, and maybe not 50-50, but very close to it. And Sundance also manages to do better numbers. So yeah, it's a question of will as well. And again, every selection is a conscious choice. I mean, we talk about quality, but it's not just quality. It's about people making choices and deciding which films have the opportunity to be shown in competition. So it's a choice, active choice, and I think if you have that in mind, because for instance, you cannot imagine Cannes being a film festival, at the level where it is, and being the most important international film festival. You cannot imagine a competition with 10 French films, for instance. That would be an outrage. And there are probably 10 good French films. Not because I'm French, I'm saying this is because we produce a lot of movies, so there are probably 10 films could go into competition in Cannes that have that level, but it's just not going to happen, because you have to make choices. And I guess this is the same when it comes to gender. If you want to show a balanced, view of the world, and that's what they try to do when it comes to geographical regions. Every competition in Cannes has films from there. Sometimes they are it's very weak. There are not so many Asian films or not so many African films, but they are still trying to, keep a balance on that level. So why not when it comes to also who's behind the camera and whether it's a woman or a man?
I'm going to move past the film festivals after a bit, but I do want to ask one more question, which is, we're talking now, okay, we're in 2020. Do the targets change? Does the pledge change? What's the sort of future of the film festival work that you want to do?
For us, I think our main our main objective now is really to go towards bigger, diversity. So to go towards inclusion at a more global level. And the problem, as you may know, in France is that we don't have the right to count. So we don't have data when it comes to ethnical or social backgrounds of people, because it's not something we are allowed to do. So we lack statistics, and that's the problem, because like I said, this is really the center of our action is, okay, get the numbers, and from this, find solutions to achieve a better, a more inclusive environment, and we don't have those numbers. So that's a tricky part, and we cannot ask them, which is, we cannot ask Cannes, for instance, to unveil the ethnical background of the people on the committee, for instance, because it's illegal in France. And this is a problem we have, because, for instance, they unveiled their selection program, their selection committee last week, I think. And for the first time, it's a majority of female programmers. but it's an all-white committee. So it's another problem. And it's just not an all-white committee, but also people from the same background. I mean, the same, you know, they went to the same schools,
yeah.
You know. So that's another problem, and this is something we are trying to work on. But again, we have the limitation of the fact that we cannot count, and so it really makes us very hard. Because the pledge in North America, for instance, when it was signed by North American Festival, included the race aspect, not just the gender parity, but in France and in a lot of European countries, it's impossible.
Okay. Let's talk about France for a minute. You know, as we alluded to earlier, the César board just resigned. Some old timers on there, I think, and that was partially to do with the Polanski debate. How does it feel like things are improving in France?
Well, improving, I don't know, but at least there is a... Because the César, I mean, it's interesting because, like I said, the Collectif was born in March 2018, and actually the first study we ever produced was about the César. And there's only one woman in the César history who actually managed to get the Best Direction award. So it's one woman out of 46, you know, awardees. And we always asked the César for the composition of their, you know, body of voters, to understand if there was parity there. And we asked them kindly, once, twice, you know. And it just never happened. I mean, apparently those figures were not available. They became available a few weeks back when, you know, they started feeling that the heat coming, but it was too late, of course. And we discovered that the voters the voters are 35% female, so of course it's not equal. But more generally, of course, it's a lot of lack of total diversity, and it's a lot of very old people who have been there for years and who are not really representative of who we are. And they haven't made any, you know, I mean, they haven't made any try to improve. They haven't tried to improve the situation like the Oscars did. I mean, when there was the Oscars so white controversy, at least the Oscars tried to bring, you know, new voices into the college of voters, but the César didn't do that. So in the end, of course, this became like a crisis that culminated, and of course, the Polanski situation was a big, you know, a part of the problem, and so they collectively decided to resign, which basically Polanski was part of that board, so I don't know if he actually resigned or if he was resigned, but that's what happened. And now, of course, I mean, they will have to change things because everybody said that it was no longer acceptable, and we'll see what's going to come next.
Okay. And does the CNC give top-up funding if you have a percentage of female crew?
Yeah, this is something something we achieved. So after Cannes, we also organized a conference with the CNC, which is the main funding body in France. And so we introduced the idea of a bonus. So it's not, you know, anything, it's not punitive, it's an incentive. If you manage to have equality in your team, so basically it's a point system, like a system that we can have in every financing you know, institution. And if you manage to get 5 points out of 10, you get 15% increase in the production funding you're entitled to get. And it actually, so we already have 2 years, about 1 year and a half now, of numbers, and it did have an effect on the margin, because sometimes it's just about, you know, I don't know, because it's not just the gender of the director or the scriptwriter, it's also the DOP, you know, all the head positions. And so there's a way to improve inclusion thanks to that.
I'm jumping around a bit because we have so much to talk to you about, which is you also looked at film criticism and the lack of female voices in film criticism. What can we do there?
Well, actually, because so like I said, the first step was the festival pledge. So we worked a lot on the festival side, and people were asking why this is the end of the, you know,
end of the pipeline.
Exactly, it's the end of the pipeline. I mean, they're not responsible, but I think everyone can do something at their, you know, level. And another issue was critics, because it's true that the critics world is very not diverse, and especially in France. I mean, we can see it's the same, you know, bunch of old men. Sorry if there are any in the room, but you know, who give their, you know, opinion on every film that's released, and at the end of the day, of course, it has a strong impact on the reception of films. So that's why we wanted to understand the numbers again, because there were no studies about critics before. And well, the numbers are clearly, I mean, because there was a study, similar study that was conducted in the US, and our numbers are slightly better.
Okay.
But still, we are far from equality, of course. And again, we couldn't, you know, count diversity because it's impossible for us in France, and in many European countries. But So it's really just focused on gender, and basically the number are quite homogeneous in the countries we studied, and it's around 30% of the reviews that are written by, I mean it's 28 actually, that are written by women versus the rest by men. Okay. So it's 1 to 2 basically. So it's still a very big unbalance, and I think this can be, you know, changed with more awareness among the critics. Probably also bigger networking, you know, with female critics, and there's also a problem that was really raised by everybody because we spoke with a lot of female critics as well. Is the problem of funding, because I mean nobody gets paid anymore to
film criticism is not very lucrative.
Exactly,
for most people.
No longer. Yeah. So and like every other field, you know, when you fight for equality, you also fight for fair, you know, pay, because otherwise it's always the same people that have the seat at the table. It's people that can actually work for free because they have other, you know, means of sustaining themselves. So this is one of the big issues as well that I think should be addressed.
And also the editors in power who are hiring the critics as well.
Yeah, exactly. And have more. Yeah, and have more women in the management positions in the media, because I mean there are lots of women journalists. I think it's 50-50 more or less everywhere. But when it comes to the top, you know, management positions, it's a very different world.
Yes. Does anybody have a question for Delphine? We have time for 1 or 2 quick questions. What?
I don't bite.
I'm shocked. Yes, we've got a question on the windowsill over there, if we can get her the mic.
Hi, I'm from Australia, and I think it's really interesting and fabulous that we're looking to get this level of equality in film festivals. But if you look at the average cinema-going audience for art house cinema around the world, it's predominantly female. So is there a way that we can look to extend this advocacy into cinema distribution and into cinema exhibition?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is another field that needs a lot of, you know, improvement. We've been working on it. So basically, we've been doing so. The only aspect of our work which is famous abroad is our festival pledge, but we actually have a pledge for distribution and exhibition in France. And again, it's really about creating awareness, because we were starting from a very, you know, low level of awareness when it comes to talking with cinema exhibitors. We really started from, you know, 0. And it's actually working, because people are starting, you know, to, discuss their own choices and trying to understand, you know, how to make an improvement on this side as well, which is crucial.
Okay, we had a question all the way over here.
Actually, one number, sorry, just one number we also accidentally discovered by doing the critics study, because the report on critics, we worked from, websites that are reviews aggregators, like Rotten Tomatoes, for instance, in the US. So they have equivalents in many countries. And so we actually, the main, the starting point was to see how many films were released in 1 year. And we realized that, so in 2019, October 2018 to October 2019, in the countries we studied, it was only 18% of the films released were actually directed by women. So it's not just, how many are produced, but how many are actually released, And then here there's a loss as well.
A question over here.
Hi. I'd like to know if all of this information that you're saying about the researches and also about the guidelines for this this tax improvement, if it's equal, is it reachable? Can we get access to it?
Yeah, so the text of the pledge is available on our website, and the list of festivals who actually committed to it is available as well. So we have, I think, 122 at this point, maybe 125, I don't know. so around that number, and yeah, it's pretty easy. And then, of course, you can talk to us, and it's very easy to be a part of it. And now we are going to try to collect data from last year to have like a report for Cannes. Because Cannes is always the anniversary of the pledge, so it's our moment,
Okay. Thank you.
And in Cannes, or can we see the results? Do you link to the results that the festivals give you, or that's sort of? So basically,
the idea. So the only thing is, it's 120 festivals that signed so far. So it's a lot of data that we need to understand how to put this into something readable and digestible. So that's what we're working on. So, but we'll have a report available for Cannes. Yeah.
And how many festivals do you want to get signed up?
I mean,
thousands?
Yeah, I mean, we never stop. But I mean, we really pushed, of course, to the biggest festivals. Also, I mean, I am a sales agent, so I was traveling the world with my films anyway, so it was part of my job. So I just on the side, you know, pushing the pledge. Now, of course, I mean, it's more, you know, on the basis of people coming to us and wanting to be a part of it, rather than just being really proactive.
Yes. Great.
Because the main bigger festivals I've signed, I mean, except for Asia, which is yet a no-go zone when it comes to gender equality, apparently. But yeah, we've had festivals from all over the world who actually committed. So
okay, great. So festivals, please talk to Delphine. We have time for one more quick question. Not the man giving birth again. Anyone else? Oh, okay. Oh, one over here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. There was can we get the mic over there? And we'll have time for this one.
Hello there. I'm hoping that my name is Rodney Charles. I'm the Vice President of the African Artists Association in Los Angeles. My question's really based more on and I wish the other panelists could also weigh in on this, but it's to do with the overarching culture, which seems to be a very toxic sort of corporate capitalist culture that is it's combative to everything that's life-giving. Meaning, for example, if women are pregnant, that's an issue. If men want to sort of spend time with families, that's an issue. On so many things that are life-giving and progressive. So I'm wondering, in many ways, whether or not we're addressing that at the same time, the overarching culture that the film ecosystem lives within. I'm just wondering, is that conversation happening in an aggressive and direct way? And also, there is another question, which is just an odd little question that I have, which is, as a man in the space where we're talking about equality and parity, when another man stands up and says something that sounds quite ridiculous and challenges from an old world paradigm, I think it's my job to challenge that. But I want to get another perspective in terms of how that could be handled. So a couple things there.
Thank you for the questions. Please do.
Just in terms of the culture point, which is absolutely well put. So I think we are absolutely assertively trying to shift the culture, and certainly within Time's Up, I don't know if you know that Nike, for example, wouldn't have pregnant female athletes as part of their campaigns. And we at Time's Up took up that issue, and they've changed their position. Next week, I'm at a Warner Brothers event that is talking about the opening of its nursery at its Leavesden studios. So we can see that there are things that are shifting that benefit men and women. I mean, men don't want to be subject to an aggressive corporate culture, just as you were just saying. So it's about how we work together to try and change some of that culture, which is in all of our interests to do so. We need to do more, but it's absolutely on Time's Up agenda.
On the first issue, do we talk about life-giving and life-giving industry? So I think it's very hard now when we try to talk about too many topics at the same time. And as a public funder, we need to choose really what is most important. Of course, that is really important. But right now, I think that we should talk about the parity and keep on doing that until we have reached somewhere. But it's a good question, and I mean, we need to have that conversation with the industry. In Sweden, we have so well-established system of children's care, so we sort of sometimes believe that we are past that. But of course, it's a very commercialized and capitalistic way of running the world that we are living in. On the second one, how shall we have a conversation with people that don't necessarily agree with us? And how are we perceived by those people that actually feel very threatened when we laugh at them? Which we do. Sometimes just to survive, because it's sometimes we've heard those things so many times. But I think that it's so important that we try to create a movement which is really inclusive, which would not be to copy the hatred on the other side. So now it's our turn. And I really got this, in Swedish we say that the coin hits the bottom sometimes. I don't know how you say that in English, but I was talking to, sorry?
Rock bottom? The penny
The
drop.
penny drop. So my penny dropped when I was meeting this guy who is a venture capitalist, who is a very rich man. He seemed very decent and very normal, and we had a very nice conversation. And then he said, you know, I have been listening to Jordan B. Peterson. Sorry about all these Canadians here, but do you know Jordan B. Peterson? He's a Canadian, very special male professor, white. He only eats meat and drinks water. Men have a biological mean to success and competition, and women has another biological. He's very old-fashioned, but he's traveling around the world and giving lectures in arenas, selling out with his action plan for men. And the action plan for men is shape up, get up from bed, make up your bed, clean yourself, clean the house. And for, you know, women, we believe that, yeah, we know that. But then I met this guy, and he said, I think Jordan B. Peterson is so fantastic. And I was like, okay. Because in Sweden, the feminist community, we are laughing at him and mocking him and being really rude to him. And then I realized that this guy, he didn't hear the biological, women should stay in the kitchen, women, you know, that part. He heard, shape up, get to work, and he realized that he hadn't done that because he had had a mother or a sister or a servant maybe that had taken care of that for him. So he had a very reasonable reason for going to listen to him, and I, with the feminist community, was only listening to what he said against women, while he was hearing what's pro a man's development. And I think that for me was like, when do we start listening to each other, even though we speak very passing by each other? And I think that it's time for that, if that was the answer.
Did anybody? I mean, I agree that, I mean, we spend a lot of time, we all spend a lot of time working together. We have many male allies who work with us on this agenda, who are supporting Time's Up and the initiative. So I think, and people do have obviously difference of view, and I agree with that. It's fundamental, it's crucial, it's the only way we're going to make progress. It's just at times, when it's the first question you get asked, you know, at such an important occasion, that it just feels slightly frustrating. And that's why, you know, I just think it's important, because we have very limited time here. This is probably a very, you know, it's a really important conversation. There's so many, the overwhelming majority of people in this room are sharing that destination of travel that we've all been talking about. And that's why we have to give space to that. The detractors have a lot of space a lot of the time. So this is a moment where we need to really try and understand, like your question, what are we trying to do about corporate culture? What are we trying to do about critics at film festivals? These are the questions which we need to get a sense of insight to, that we can all take something away. Because actually, it isn't about just coming here, listening to all this wonderful conversation. Of course it is. But it's about, what do we do when we leave this room? What do we do when we leave this room? When you next see... Go to work.
No, change the world.
Hey, I love that.
Get to work and change the world.
But also it's about, what do you do when you see one of your colleagues being harassed and bullied? Do you stand up? Yeah. Do you go help? Do you say that's not acceptable to the person who's doing it? We all can do something wherever we are, in whatever layer of the system.
Yeah, and the questions sometimes, like the gentleman's question, I think he has left the room, if he is not here. It wasn't very... inclusive and open-minded, and I think that there are times when you take that battle, but you choose you choose those times because he didn't maybe want to listen. And then sometimes it's just leave it and keep on with it. Just don't waste your energy because we need the energy.
Yeah. So time is up, indeed.
Oh.
But no, wait. Don't clap yet. Of course, I want to thank our amazing panelists and EFM and Themba and Manu and Petra. But Anna, do you want to leave us with a few words?
Oh, wow. I was asked to leave us with a few words, and I think that we have covered the words. Time's up. But what we all need to do is really cooperate and take all initiatives together and share. And I think when we share the role modeling way of working and remembering the good things that are being doing and just keep up the good energy because we're going to need it. Yes. But we will help each other, right? Yes. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you for coming.